last but definitely not least, speaker for the day, Mitchell Toomey is the global lead of knowledge services for the United Nations for the USA. So let's welcome Mitchell.
Thank you. Thank you. Give me a moment here to set up this computer. I hope I can get it. I had to present in this crazy format, which the wonderful organizers had some issues helping me with, so give me 1 minute. Yes, Prezi. Has anyone used Prezi before? It's great for the last presentation of the day because it moves a little bit and it keeps people awake. I just need to try to get the browser, what do you call it here? Okay, hello. That's better. So as if this wasn't late enough, I'm going to wait here a couple minutes while I get my screen. All right. So while this loads, thank you, and I just want to clarify, I work for the United Nations in the United States. I am a U.S. citizen, but I do not work for the U.S. consulate to the United Nations. It's always important in our world to clarify these things. We've heard a lot today about the various approaches and the kind of the troubles of finding the value proposition and the ROI of these enterprise collaboration approaches, and I think I got an idea, and I think it worked for us, and we've been doing this kind of a social renouvellement, a renewing of our collaboration for a couple of years, and we figured out something that is a pretty interesting trick, and I think it might work for you too. Our businesses are quite different. I'd say we're in the service business. We help countries, specifically the part of the UN I work for is called the UN Development Program. And so we're kind of like a consulting organization that helps countries that are at peace and relatively stable figure out how to grow. So it's very much like any consulting. We look for their opportunities and their strengths and weaknesses and so on. But the most important thing we do, and the reason they hire us, is that we're objective, and we help them find solutions that we have no inherent interest in promoting ourselves. We are a networker. We help people bring the right knowledge into their country. We help governments be better. We lead by example in some cases where if there's a difficult thing that needs to be done, like opening up your government and being more equitable, we can't do that unless we do it ourselves first. So we took a bold step in changing the approach we take to not only our internal collaboration, but how we face the world itself. And what I'll tell you here is that there's two very different stories that you have to tell your users and your sponsors to make this work. So starting with the story for the users, we've had a great history for over 10 years in using the community of practice model of knowledge sharing and peer support. So what this is we're talking about strategic managed communities of practice, where if we have 170 offices around the world, and we're organized into practices. So we have a governance practice that helps people do elections. We're doing 30 elections every year in different countries. We have a response to HIV practice that just helps countries with that problem manage their health systems. We have a gender equality group that helps people find ways to make their governance and systems more equitable. They're all different categories of development, but they each have different specialties, and they have their own thing. So we put people all over the world, and they're asked to kind of maintain a kind of a certain level of quality standard of their services. And so in order to support that, we bring them into a community of practice. So if you're an employee of the UNDP in this area, you're automatically a member of this community. In addition to working for your local boss, you're a member of the community. That means that every year there's a trip. You go to, everyone gathers centrally and has a kind of a week-long workshop where they game out new ideas and look at what happened and what went wrong and so on. But most importantly, they've had an email group that supports them and a dedicated facilitator for that email group. So in our organizational structure, we have 8 of these communities of practice. We have lots of little communities of practice, but these are what we call the strategic communities. And they've always had a person there to help structure the conversation. And the model would be someone would ask a question into the group, the moderator would look at it, compel those in the group to respond, and then construct what we call a consolidated reply, which is a kind of a executive summary plus all of the specific detailed analysis. So this is kind of we had a head start and maybe an unfair advantage over some of you who are struggling even to get the budgets for the tools, in that we've had this staff out there, and we've had a kind of culture develop that is a peer support culture. These communities have always been highly rated in staff surveys. They find them to be incredibly valuable, unlike many of the corporate services that they are asked to vote on. But we often found there was trouble at headquarters justifying this expense, if that sounds familiar, because they normally weren't involved in these communities, and it was very demand-driven and peer support. There wasn't kind of a corporate message that was being pushed into this community other than kind of our policy guidelines and kind of standards of practice. So they've been great, and they've really helped us structure and formalize how we provide advice and make sure that the right advice gets around the world to the right people. But they've developed into silos, and that was kind of a necessary part of it being an email list, because you can't keep people just didn't want to be on multiple email lists at the time, and they became overwhelming. So we had a strategy to merge the communities of practice and take advantage of social kind of peer-to-peer technology and new ways of leveraging this trend in our culture. So we've been looking at a lot of these today, and I think you're going to see these more and more, and this is kind of going to be part of the governance of how you work on knowledge sharing and collaboration. I guess the point that we start with is that this has always been going on, and in the group that we were in the brainstorming, people said if you just looked at your Outlook traffic, you could identify your social network in your organization, who talks to whom, who gets CC'd, who gets TO'd, who gets the most responses, et cetera. And you can kind of develop a basic picture of your organization. And that turns out to be very valuable. I mean, to know who's actually getting a lot of responses to an email, even if they're not in the hierarchy, it tells you something about that person. But that data isn't really available to managers and executives. It's stored in the back of the archives of the email system. And so our strategy was basically to say, what if we just focused on continuing to foster this kind of peer support, merging it a little bit so that, for example, if a government asked us a question on a gender imbalance issue and is having an election, they didn't have to go to 2 different of our groups, but they could combine these responses and really come up with a better solution for that specific scenario. So we want to improve that, but at the same time, and perhaps more importantly, is to kind of liquidate some of this asset value that is in all of this exchange that the organization has yet to been able to tap into. There's been no mechanism for not only analyzing it, but then looking at what it actually means. So the first step was to, I'll show you, we have a social platform, but we preceded it with all of the information we had from these email networks. And so we automatically, when people would go to their profile for the first time, they'd already see the email exchanges that they had been participating in over the past. We went back 5 years. So it kind of gave them a head start there. And we did a number of offline initiatives like merging these annual community of practice meetings so that two or three practices would meet at once, or we'd split it up into different groups. And so we gave them an interest in participating in this. But the real reason, if you're kind of talking to headquarters, was to create a tangible and actionable data set behind all of that. So if we just take the example here, so this is a picture of our network. This was as of 2010. But the green dots are people who have, I believe that, let's see, green dots are outreaching people, so they're commenting on other people's things, and they're colleaguing, as we say, or friending people. The blue dots are attracting attention. They're being followed, they're being commented, their content is being commented upon, content's being recommended to others. And the centrality of their dot in the middle of the networks means they're very central to the health of the network. The size is the relevant or relative amount of interaction they have. So you can actually take another step into this thing, and I think this is where we're all going to need to go, is to not just make a pretty visualization, and it helps because executives kind of like it, and it's a much more realistic org chart than what you might see in a hierarchical organogram. But we can, by looking at this and analyzing it, we've found that there are very specific types of people. And so the red lines here represent one person's network within this mass. And you can see this profile, we call it a connector, because they're well connected to those at the core of the network, but they also have some long lines that integrate them into the wider network. So they've got a very healthy connection profile. Another profile is the expert, or the person who attracts a lot of attention but doesn't do much networking of their own. So they're busy doing their work, and they do it in this measurable environment, so people can watch it, and people are watching it, and people are recognizing them for their value. We also have a profile that we found called a Groundbreaker. It's like a connector, but they don't waste any time connecting and following to the connected people. They're more interested in going out and finding new people, finding people at the perimeter of the social graph. So once you have this thing and you can start to understand what it is, you can start to turn it into a liquid asset. So you have a business case now that you can go to executives and saying, let's give the staff the tool they want to collaborate and share, but don't look at it as a waste of time. Look at every transaction that they add to this platform as another data point in our understanding of how the organization works, so that we can then leverage that information for future business decisions. You take for example, you give the analogy of Facebook, where there's a lot of people that use it for their own benefit. The individual gets the benefit of using it. They share with whom they want to share. They connect with people. They advertise themselves. They build their reputation. They get a lot of the benefit of Facebook. But Facebook went public, and it's not doing as well as they'd like it to, but it's still worth billions. And the reason it is because of the social graph, because of the underlying data that's available to advertisers, to marketers, to put information in front of the right people at the right time. So they've liquidated some of the benefit and given it to a marketplace that can then take advantage of it. So of course you have, your benefit to Facebook users is you don't tell Facebook users, hey, come use Facebook because we want to sell you things. You focus on their own benefits. But you have this other story to tell people who have something to gain by that social graph. And so, of course, we're in the UN, we're not looking to make a profit or sell ads on our platform. But that benefit that's available, that will be generated by the user activity, is a latent asset. And unless you do something with it, you're never going to make the case to the CEO or the CFO. So, for example, what we're doing now, and we have a couple of years now of experience of actually using this data to make business decisions. We train managers on how to, for example, connectors. If you want to bring a group together that you want to learn about what's new and what's happening in a certain area, you can bring your connectors together. You don't have to bring everybody together. And so, like these communities of practice meeting, as I was saying, it used to be just invite everybody, fly everybody in from 177 countries because we just don't know who should be there and we don't want to miss anybody. But in this case, we can have smaller groups where people are invited to join what we call advisory teams. And so those people that have a kind of connector profile are given a benefit. They're given extra missions. We call them missions, business trips. They're given opportunities to go to trainings, to things like this, that they might not have had an opportunity to do if they were just plugging away at their line work. Experts, we do have paid experts. We do have advisors, and we monitor their performance based on how well they're followed and recommended and so on. But that doesn't make up nearly even a small fraction of those that qualify as experts in this model. Those that qualify as experts are just people who know how to get something done. And in any large bureaucracy, the UN or a large conglomerate, there's a lot of very important people around who just know how to get something done in the system. And so if you can find those people, they'll have exponential value for you. And for example, if you're corporate and you're trying to get a new product out or a new system in place or new processes, if you focus on advocating to these experts and getting them to be on your side, they can have exponential value in your communications. People are already listening to them. If you can co-opt some of their attention for your purpose, then you're ahead of the game. So, and groundbreakers obviously are what's next? The innovators, the people that find the interesting things. These profiles, when put together, create a very delightful kind of opportunity for managers that they might not have thought about before. So you end up turning the discussion around from, why do I want my people, chatting and social networking and, what's this engagement? They're engaging with each other. I don't have any control over it. It's taking attention away. My command and control is being disintegrated, et cetera. You turn that discussion into something that offers them real value. So the value proposition you make to the executives is that by convincing people to use the system more, they are adding value to the data that they can use to make decisions. So it's ironic that we have a lot of people, in the senior executive wing that will never get to participate themselves, but they're some of our biggest advocates. They go around and everything they do, they force their teams to use the platform as a mechanism for it, or they ensure that they'll only allow for conversations to happen on the platform, not because they want to use it, but because they know that they are indirectly generating benefit from that. The asset growth is quantifiable. So we have, this was our 2010, and this is what we have in 2012. You're starting to see differentiation. Subject matter experts are clustering. You're getting new growth. This big green area of growth was a big initiative we did with a government of Brazil and brought in an entirely new set of people. I don't think I mentioned one of the most important characteristics here, that this is not a staff network. This is a knowledge network. Anybody in the organization can invite anybody, and they're encouraged to do so. They're encouraged to go out and build their network in this platform. So the more that they do that, the more benefits are available to them, including these missions and other things. So in a case like this, where I go to a conference like this, what I'm hoping to do is to meet a lot of you and invite you to join an advisory team on social media or enterprise social management, so that first of all I can bring you in and we can have another place to continue the kind of discussions we have here. But the secondary benefit is that if the government of Bulgaria is trying to figure out how to achieve efficiency in their organization, we can cross-post a query to this group and see if anybody has a good idea. And you might have a good idea, and then all of a sudden I've brought an enormous amount of value into the network. So we've got people all over the world doing that in any situation that they go into. They're trying to attract as many of the external experts as they can. But it's, organic growth is not the only thing that you're going to get. You still have to get people interested in an individual benefit. People are, they're all, especially the UN, we're talking about the cause. People will do a lot of things for a cause that they wouldn't do for their job. So we have a, built-in benefit. We're saving the world, as they say. Helping the organization is a cause in itself. And so I don't ignore the fact that there's something different about that. So you have to give them a personal benefit as well. And what we've done to kind of foster that is to do kind of an end run around using the tool to telling people that we're looking for a new profile of people to work in the organization. And this has been a big change management exercise, and it includes work with our HR department. Before talking about getting involved in this stuff, we started by saying we need people to change how they work, that we need people to be more open, we need to have different competencies, and we developed new training programs and so on for the project managers and people in our field offices. And so looking at the kind of new skills that we want them to have, I'll go through this quickly, this is online, but communicate your work while you're doing it, not at the end of the project. I mean, we do a lot of 3-year projects and come out with a 50-page report saying what happened. Nobody reads it. Anybody that might have been trying to start up a project during those 3 years could benefit from a tweet or a don't do this or a blog post. And so we wanted that to be part of the person's job, not just a report at the end of the project. know about the tools, know what's out there, not about the one that we're trying to push, but know what's available and what people are using and what you might find. Understanding social networks and how they might help you accomplish your mission. Managing your personal online brand so that people got used to the idea that they had an individual brand to maintain publicly, but also, eventually we're going to talk about it internally. Dealing with information overload. I mean, information overload is not something that's just you shrug your shoulders and say, gosh, I can't wait till it gets better. We just live in a knowledge-abundant world, and it's never going to be a knowledge scarcity world again. The trick is going to be how well you learn to filter, and how well you think about things, and not just shrug your shoulders about it, there being too much. Storytelling, getting people to think about how to tell a story, and we do all kinds of workshops now where we bring people together and do, I don't know if you've, TED Talks and themoth.com and these different sites as aspirational examples. How to ask better questions. We have a question market where people are allowed to downvote people if they asked a very vague or difficult to answer question. And be on top of innovations. Gather and make sense of information in real time, and tell the story with data. So these are all kind of capacities that we want people to have, and we want them to be using these capacities in their public-facing work and leading by example. As I said, our customers are often coming to us asking, how do we modernize our industry or our sector or our government? And we're not going to be a really great position to help them if we don't look like we're a little bit more modern ourselves. So we made that an important and critical part of their job, and it's part of their performance evaluation to have some of these capabilities. So really, when we get to using the platform, we can pitch it as a toolkit that will help them expedite learning these new things. And so it becomes an important part of their job. And oh, by the way, we have a benefit for you, which is that we're going to give you kind of a field training on how to do these things. And you can do it if you're not comfortable or ready to do that publicly and blog and story tell about what you're doing to the public. Do it here. Do it on practice here. And we've got a place for you to do that. And then also to kind of continue that kind of knowledge in their communities of practice that we have. This will go through just quickly to show you what we've got. We have, for the most part, the key sticky content that people have come back for is the suggestions. So we have an algorithm that scans everything that's going on, does some manual interventions, and then makes suggestions for people's profiles based on what they've looked at in the past and what they've clicked on and what their people in their connector or expert profile have clicked on and so on. And that's what people click on. They click on the right column. We've got plenty of heat maps to show that they're coming in here, to see what the activity is, but really to get that suggested content. But more and more, the growth is that they are adding updates and doing all the stuff that you'd expect them to do. But they did so because they're getting this benefit of seeing the suggested content. We still send them emails. We send them updates, the notifications and things. But they're coming in for the suggestions. And of course, better filtering tools. We've given them some starter tools for how to filter things. We have profiles, but we present it as not just kind of a way to get to know you, but this is almost your evidence stream. This is the evidence of what you're doing for the organization. And so, you don't have to be verbose in everything, but if you do something important, this is where we're going to be looking for it. And management has been key in compelling people to do that. Then we have spaces, which are the kind of the groups. It's a standard part, but we use them to allow for anyone to create a space and invite anybody. We had a guy that was working on the election in Afghanistan. He created a space and invited 10,000 people to it because he had this big list of people who had been involved with big USAID projects in some years in the past. He only got 1,000 people, but he got 1,000 people, and he added 1,000 new data points to our network, and there was no privacy issues or anything because these spaces are kind of standalone within the knowledge network. Technical point for those of you that were in the tools conversations, we had to use Drupal. We had to use open source, and that's a unique thing for the UN because, as I'll point out in a minute, we not only use this platform for ourselves, but we actually rent out wings of it for others to use. And we couldn't justifiably go to the government of Brazil, for example, and say, we're going to are going to support you by facilitating this knowledge exchange for the Rio +20 conference, which was a big event recently. Oh, and by the way, you're going to have to license, we're going to have to buy a bunch of Microsoft licenses to do so. It's just, politically, it's very difficult for us to be seen as salespeople for especially US software products. So we had to bite the bullet and go into a little bit of a custom development process, but there was a business case for it. So it's all the open stuff. So this is we did a global management meeting as well. It was catalytic in 2011 to get the senior managers, the same story we heard, the success story over and over. This got the executives to see the user side of it. They actually ended up, a lot of them, ended up continuing to use it, not from the asset management side, but from the user side. But this is where, we've done a little bit more than just create a group. We have this, as I mentioned, people can be selected for the advisory team if they're actually active experts. And that becomes part of their credentials. So as many advisory teams as you can get on, the better. But it comes with some responsibilities. So if you want to continue to be an active advisor, you have to recommend other people's content, you have to comment, you have to do a certain number of things. And we keep metrics on that very carefully. Let's see what else. We have, we've always had this team. As I said, we have facilitators for each of those communities of practice. But their job kind of became very, process-oriented. They would get a query. They would do a long, 3-week process of getting the answers together and consolidate into a document. And they would look at one subject matter on its own, independently. They would be hired not just for their facilitation experience, but also for their subject matter expertise. So the old profile was, dedicated thematic knowledge, consolidation and management of e-discussions, and then also dealing with the public publications that the organization puts out in that category. So, really, they got really good at it, and some of them were fantastic, and they enjoyed that the specialized expertise. But they ended up supporting this group of, the biggest ones were 1,000 or 2,000 members in these communities of practice, and they were very protective of the boundaries there because they wanted to make sure that they managed it well. So we've changed the profile of that job. And now, instead of dealing with documents and collecting the knowledge base for that area, their job is to curate a collection of people. If they find knowledge gaps, if there's an emerging area, we've got governance is an example, open governance, open data, e-governance, and so on. We're getting a lot of demand for that kind of knowledge, and frankly, we just didn't have it in-house. And so the facilitator's job in that practice was to go to events like this, but in the kind of the governance area, and find those people that are really doing that very well, and sponsor, we did a lot of sponsor hackathons and other things that would get us closer to that community. And that's the job of this person, was how much value did they add to the social graph in that specific needed area. And they also had to maintain engagement targets. So it wasn't just collecting these people, but actually doing what we call mobilizations to get those people to do something. And a couple people before said, event-driven seems to work a lot better than just the casual knowledge sharing. So what you have to do is turn the year into kind of a series of formal casual events, whether it be a webinar that you invite an external expert to kind of boost their ego and get some people on the phone and on the, I know our colleague from BP is not here, but we'd love to use some of those tools. But you create events, you create them out of thin air so that you can get people to engage, because they will engage in events. But it doesn't have to be a global management meeting. It can be a really interesting talk that somebody's giving on a telephone call. But once you've got them, you give them an excuse to continue to do things, and they will go through these episodes. We manage prediction markets, which is just simply you ask that group of advisors to estimate what they think is going to happen in a certain area. It gives them something very tangible to do. They're collaborating, but not just for, to say, I'm going to this office or I'm going to be there. They're actually being asked to do a task, a knowledge transaction. It gives them a reason to come in. It gives them a boost to their engagement score. And it also gives us real value. The value that they're presenting is then shared with our customers. So I mentioned that, I mentioned it in detail in the breakout, but we went kind of radically away from collecting documents as part of our kind of collaboration strategy. We have an intranet. We do have a SharePoint system that's used to kind of manage our fiduciary responsibility to track financial transactions and the accompanying documentation. But we kind of gave up on making a big database of knowledge products or kind of policy documents and white papers and presentations. And it was a gamble, but it was, we said, there's kind of the connect versus the collect school, and you got to put a lot of effort into either one. And we put all our chips on connect. And the pitch we gave was that people usually find a document and it's not exactly what they need. It's not, it's generalized and enough that it can please a lot of people, but it doesn't hit the mark for any one individual. They usually look up who's the author and they contact the author and say, can you give me some help? So we position documents as kind of sales collateral for expertise, and so it's really a kind of a one step in the knowledge gathering process that doesn't need to focus, you don't focus all your attention there, focus it a little bit further downstream on the actual expertise. But that being said, we do have some areas where we force people to collaborate in a certain way, and that one obviously is our risk management. When we do go to Haiti and other things, we don't just hope that our social graph will show us data that we can somehow use for decisions. We force the issue, and we give very specific instructions on when to do kind of an after-action review and so on. And so I don't want to give the impression that it's all kind of laissez-faire. Then we've got some videos. I'm not going to play them here, but to tell the story again, we talked about storytelling. As part of the culture change project, we spent some money and we put some people out in the field to get some of these experts and some people that we identified as experts long ago because of their active participation in the communities of practice to actually pitch for why people needed to do this. And so we'd sit them out and kind of almost as an exit strategy for some people who were retiring, we gave them kind of a little documentary about what they've done, and they made the pitch for us that nothing will matter if you don't share it. What I did is only going to be important because I know it's still going to be there when I'm gone. And you appeal to the emotions. The emotional pull is going to give you a lot more user engagement than kind of the numbers. But then there's also there's some infographics explaining to the executives what's happening and what this thing is and so on. But visuals and so on are very important. The final point I would make is there's two different stories you have to tell. You have to get good at two quite different pitches. The first is to the users. What's the benefit for them? How are they going to do better by participating in this kind of exchange than they would otherwise? And we have a head start. We've done these communities, and so we have a little bit of a better case history and kind of a folklore about how this has helped in the past. And so we've done that. But the other pitch, which is more important, and is where you do need to, it has to be more than a hobby. The Alcatel-Lucent team has this great fellow that's got some extra time, and he's doing social network analysis because he knows how to do internet network analysis or whatever the skill is. Data science is the differentiator. Becoming capable of providing actionable intelligence based on this data is where the value is. That's the ROI. The ROI is a very different kind of calculation for the individuals. As I said, there's benefit everywhere. You're going to have to compartmentalize it, give some of the benefit to the users, but take some of the benefit off the table for the organization. And that's where we go. And finally, the going outside the castle, I think, is an important concept. Yes, your staff knows a lot. The employees know a lot. They sometimes are kind of disillusioned maybe when experts are brought in, consultants are brought in to validate management decisions when they could have done it themselves. But if you invite the staff out to be experts in public forum, all of a sudden the organization and the individual have a different relationship. The organization is almost the agent for this individual, and it's fostering the individual's personal brand. And I think that by providing that kind of new relationship that's different than employee to business, and where the power balance and the benefit have to be split, and it's not all going to go for the organization. It can't all go for the individual, but there has to be a balance there. Thank you. Any questions? I know it's late. I won't be upset if you don't have any. So.
Yes. One question concerning the graphs you have been setting up. It looks like you are able to identify the person who is behind the dot, because you said you're going to take initiatives in order to incentive them or to invite them to any kind of whatever. Is that really, how do people react if you call them and say, hey, I found out that through our social network analysis you are dealing with that and that subject, and do you want to do that and that?
It's always been corporate IT policy that anything you do on any system in the organization is the property of the organization. It's just never been used. And so I think that the culturalization that you need to do is that it's, wow, they're starting to use this. We don't use it for anything derogatory. If you don't participate, there's no downside. We only use it for congratulations or additional new benefits. So, but yeah, it's taken some getting used to, especially for people who had been assuming that they were, doing their own sole proprietorship and offering advice on their own terms. They work for the organization. We pay them to provide a value to the organization, and this is just a way of making a deal, giving them something that they want and taking a piece for the organization. Cocktails, anyone? No.
That's right.
Sorry, everybody.
Oh, no.
Believe me, I'm a very thirsty man too. People who have made a career out of the old knowledge management, the collect model, and are very good people.
Yeah.
They're often very hidden people, and they're conscious of the fact that their work has never been capitalized on, and they're not very visible. Have you put in place mechanisms to get them out of their little shells and turn them into great advocates and communicators? Have you got some amazing success stories of hidden nuggets in the organization?
Well, I mean, to be fair, the reason we went all in on Connect is because we're horrible at collect. We've never had a lot of people really doing that well. It's always been kind of a nice to have if they have the time. There are some people who do it. We do have some, very studious kind of information managers and who've done a lot of that work. But because of the quantitative nature of what we're talking about with the Connect, you can still be a collector, but you're collecting connections. So they have the same job to do, but instead of the asset that they're looking at being a document, it's being an individual or a person in the network or a collection of people. So we still need the same skills. We need that diligent kind of attention to detail. And yes, we do have people that come out of the woodwork and say, oh, I actually know the new president of Nigeria. He was my college roommate. So if anyone needs a kind of a private audience, I can arrange that. But there's all this, that's all that kind of latent value is under there, and it just needs a marketplace to be traded.
Sorry from my side as well. The collaboration or the collaborational aspect of this network is only exchange of information, or is there any decision-making tool or whatever combined with it? Is there any kind of,
Well, we do, as I said, this prediction market model is something that's very widely used. And what that means is that in a collaborative space, if we're, for example, trying to set up an agenda or a program for a meeting like this, we ask everyone, what do they want to hear about? So people can recommend something, and then others support it and comment on it. So you end up getting a kind of a list prioritized by the crowd as to what the most important items are. So that and we've actually had a be the change kind of a contest for the corporate management, who asked the same thing of all staff, for improvements in efficiency and other things that people could recommend and then vote for. So there is decision making happening inside of it. I wouldn't say that it's become the only place where decisions get made, but I think it's, we use the term socialize something, and it's not about socialized medicine or anything like that, but in the organization, if you want to socialize an idea, which means you want to spread a draft around to see if anybody's got any comments before you officially kind of go forward with it, this has become the way to kind of socialize something and put it out there before you spend too much time on it. So that part of our existing business has been helped a lot by this.
Any other questions? Everyone's afraid to ask now.
Yeah, I'll be happy
You'll
to
be
talk
around,
over
right?
drinks. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
there you
going to
go.
be. Thank you
right.
very much.
Thank you.